Howdy doody. I know this chapter review is out late, but here we are. I feel like saying this quickly. The way I talk about this chapter might seem different from the last few because number one, I'm just trying to get this video out here. It is way late, so trying to get it out there. But number two, we are fresh off some really intense, depressing, and fantastic and super serious chapters, so I'm gonna let loose a little bit. I was actually surprised this chapter did not continue the Phantom Troupe flashback. I really thought we were gonna see events leading up to and including the Kurta Clan massacre, but as of now, that does not seem to be the case. However, I do think it's totally possible that we'll get random flashbacks from individual characters as we get more of these chapters, but we'll just have to wait and see. And although I am a little disappointed we aren't continuing the flashbacks, I am pretty satisfied with how it ended. So if we never get more flashbacks, that's okay. Although I do really want to see more. Before I get into the chapter, one big thing I gotta say. And that thing is some huge news. It's probably pretty likely that you've already heard about it, but in case you haven't, it was confirmed by Togashi's assistant that on top of the chapters already published, 30 more are on the way. To my knowledge, the last thing I had heard was that we were gonna get a total of 20 chapters. So I thought we were coming up on that halfway mark. So the announcement of 30 more is huge, at least to me. So with those 30 extra chapters, that would put the Succession War arc at around 80 chapters, and for reference, York New City arc was 56, Greed Island was 66, and the Chimera Ant arc was 133 chapters. And I would suspect that due to the density and complexity of this arc, I think it might run somewhere around the same length as the Chimera Ant arc, hitting somewhere around 100 to 120 chapters. And that seems reasonable to me, because after these 30 chapters, we'll hit around 80, and I think at that point, with another 40 chapters, I think the whole Succession War could be wrapped up. Will it? I have no idea. I don't really see the end in sight. However, if this arc were to run for 100 to 120 chapters, that gives us from where we currently are 70 more chapters to get the whole Succession War wrapped up. However, knowing Togashi, it could be way shorter than that. Togashi could be like, alright, I'm wrapping things up, and things could get moving. But he could also get sidetracked, and it could last much longer. You guys let me know what you think. How long do you think this arc is going to go on for? And do you think we'll even see the end of it? But with that little bit of news out of the way, let's get into this chapter. So we pick right back up in our current timeline with Nobunaga, Phinx, Feitan, and that hostage just in the back walls behind the room with the trapdoor. And there's nothing super exciting going on right away. Pretty much Nobunaga and Phinx are talking about who the people are that have set the trap and what kind of Nen type they might be. And I'm not going to get into exactly what they were theorizing because we as the reader already know how the trap works to some degree. We know the old guy Gatame had some kind of ability where he was able to create a Nen clone, and then Vocante, who is an emitter, is the one actually responsible for this Nen trap, the invisible doors that teleport people. So seeing Phinx and Nobunaga try to figure that out isn't very important, but it's nice to see their level of intelligence. We see Phinx isn't the smartest in analyzing Nen abilities. Nobunaga and Feitan aren't necessarily on a genius level, but they're definitely smart. And it's just nice seeing Phinx and Nobunaga argue with each other, especially after the flashbacks we got. It feels like the bond and friendship between the spiders feel even more real and even more genuine. But overall, it's just nice to see them actually think about it. It makes them feel more like real people rather than they just automatically know the answers because the writer says they do. All four of them are in the backroom entrance to room 3101, and the guy Feitan has been keeping hostage says that the door into 3101 through the back is locked. But Feitan just tells him to unlock it unless he wants another asshole. That was a weird threat, but alright, I'm with it. The guy opens the door and they get inside room 3101's bathroom. The guy says that the door is locked again, and Feitan just kinda motions with his sword and is like, come on, Open it, buddy. And these door opening panels were weird to me. Because to me, it made very little sense why the guy would be like, oh, this door is locked, when the lock to the door is right in front of him. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but it was just weird. I don't know if he was supposed to be nervous, trying to waste time. I'm not sure. As I'm recording this, I just looked back. It seems like he was just nervous and maybe just dumb, acting dumb. I still don't know. It still bothers me, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really affect the story or the plot line, so it's whatever. But back to the good stuff. So Nobunaga, Phinx, and Feitan are discussing what's even the point of having those doors locked. And they basically explain how whoever's watching room 3101, if an attacker were to just walk through the main door, they get teleported away. However, if they were to say bust in through the wall, whoever was in that room watching it, they could basically just run to the bathroom, lock that door, and run out the secret door and lock that one. Essentially, the only point of it is to buy whoever's running away time to figure out what to do or to just disappear, while also wasting time of the person who busted in. It's just a time-wasting scheme. Nothing too complicated, nothing too important for right now. And although it's not super important to us as the reader to see Nobunaga, Phinx, and Feitan talk about these things, it's just kind of a simple way to kind of show off the group's ability to learn and decipher information about the enemy. So although it may not have been needed, it's still nice and adds to the characters of the spiders. So the spiders come to the conclusion that the trap can only be set off by entering the front door. So busting through the wall or entering from the back room won't set off the trap. But just to make sure that their assumption is correct, they push the hostage out into the main room. And once they see that he's okay and he didn't vanish, they tell him to leave the room and go out in the hallway, and then to come back in. And this dude's just out alone in the hallway looking into the room, sees the spiders, and he's like, this is my chance. I'm gonna make a run for it. And moments like these are so funny to me because we as the reader know that he's not gonna get away, but I love seeing the guy's face as he's making a run for it, probably thinking to himself something along the lines of, okay, just a little bit further and I'll get away. I just need to get right up here and I'll lose them in the crowd. But then what to him was probably instantaneous, Feitan catches up to him and stands in his way. And I'm not much of a power scaler, so I'm not using math or calculations or anything like that. But from my perception, Feitan is probably, if not certainly, the fastest member of the troupe. So that just adds a little extra layer of why I think it's funny. The fastest guy was the one to chase down someone completely normal. Someone who has no nen abilities. Like, that's funny to me. Could just be me, but anywho, Feitan tosses his sword from one hand to the other and asks the guy to pick the left or the right. The guy doesn't really understand, he starts getting all nervous. And then, like it's a joke, Nobunaga tells the guy to come back into the room or else Feitan will cut off both of his ears. Then Phinx chimes in and says that once Feitan cuts off one ear, he won't stop there. And I have mixed feelings about this because on one hand, it's a humorous scene, you know, dark humor, whatever. But on the other hand, we are fresh off a chapter where we saw the spider's childhood best friend dead in a bag hanging on a tree, likely tortured, and maybe even worse than that, okay? And now we're seeing them making jokes about torturing someone. It's just like, it's funny, but like, is it that funny? Moving on. The hostage gets all nervous and he's like, okay, I'm coming back into the room. And one step in, boop, he's gone. Vanishes. Dunzo. With the guy triggering the trap without Gotame there, the spiders confirm that he's not the one responsible for the trap and is in fact a second Nen user. And Nobunaga then confirms that the trap is a landmine type, which essentially is a small area in which simply stepping into it activates the trigger. However, because the trap is so effective and powerful, it requires a lot of aura, and because of that, there can only be something like 2 to 3 of these landmines active at once. Or at least it appears that way so far. And I'm gonna say this super quick. At least off the top of my head, there's Vocante and then another girl that's working with the hunters, and these two people are the only other teleporter type Nen users other than Nav. And because of what they can do compared to what he can do, please The gods in the heavens give Nov the respect he deserves. His ability, with hindsight to like what the average teleporter can do, Nov's ability is absolutely insane. Like, broken beyond belief in its own way. It is just a real shame that he was not cut out for that experience. Poof's End did a number on him. But, point remains, if you didn't respect his teleportation ability, well, respect it now, please God. But anyway, let's get back on track. Phinx then says that they need to figure out if the trap is single or multi-use, because if it's single use, they can just wait for someone to come to reset the trap, but if it's multi-use, then that's a separate problem. Feitan seems to be kind of sick and tired of this guessing game, so he just goes to a random room, knocks on the door, takes a dude out of the room, brings him to the trap, and nudges the guy with his sword. The guy threatens Feitan with the classic, "You're dead meat, blah blah blah," and Feitan isn't having any of it, and pokes the guy with the sword to go into the room, and the guy vanishes. The spiders determine the landmine is multi-use, and Feitan looks like he's ready to go on a little bit of a killing spree, and he then says that Nobunaga had the right idea, and the quickest way to deal with the trap is for one of them to just go through it. Feitan says he'll go, but Hinrigh and Kenny return and tell them to wait. Hinrigh says that there's a way to find the Heily secret base. And after they find its location, the spiders are free to rush in and storm it. We get this odd angle of Kenny, and I'll get more into that in a little bit, but he looks over at Hinrigh and then tells the spiders that the Char will go after 2 suspected Heily members, and Hinrigh will stay to help find the Heily base location. Kenny also says that Hinrigh was the man who found room 3101, so he can be trusted. Kenny heads out, and we see Hinrigh pause as if he were shown to be thinking about something. But then the first thing Hinrigh does is say that he's not there to cause trouble for the spiders. And I like that we get to see once again how well Hinrigh can navigate situations. When I heard him say that he wasn't there to cause trouble, I immediately thought about his conversation with Hisoka, although my personal interpretation was that Hinrigh was more so pleading with Hisoka rather than negotiating. It doesn't really matter, because whether he was in a position to negotiate or not, he was able to navigate the conversation very well with Hisoka, and he's doing it once again. And I'd like to point out that this time around, when negotiating and navigating around some people, he's acting a lot more confident and assertive than he was with Hisoka. And the reason why is pretty simple in my opinion. With Hisoka, he knew that he was a crazy bloodlusted killer clown, and knew that if he said the wrong thing, Hisoka could just snap and try to kill him. So he was walking on eggshells basically, but he knows that the spiders are level-headed to some degree because they're allied with the Char, and because the Char are temporarily allied with the Shiyu. Bada bing, bada boom, he was not nearly as nervous around the spiders as he was with Hisoka. Anyway, Hinrigh gives a slightly altered version of the same talk he gave to Hisoka to the spiders. He says that the Kakin Mafia crave balance, and this balance seems to be a reoccurring theme here. I don't have any super deep thoughts about it, but I'm thinking about it. Anyway, Hinrigh says that the Heily disrupts said balance, so if the spiders want to destroy the Heily, he'll gladly help. Nobunaga says that they don't need his help and that they're just gonna rush in. Then Phinx chimes in and says that he's not even ready to go in yet. And then Feitan asks Hinrigh how he even plans to locate the Heily base. Hinrigh explains that he has a tracking device and that they will plant it on someone who goes through the trapdoor. Phinx says that if they give the tracker to some random person, that they're just gonna get killed, and then the tracker will be found and destroyed. And Henry's like, yeah, I know. That's why I'm gonna turn it into an oyster, because that's the logical thing to do. Hinrigh goes on to explain that someone will swallow the oyster, and even if someone is searched, and he specifies cavity search, the tracker won't be found. He also says how the tracker will keep its oyster form until it runs out of aura, which will take about 2 hours. Phinx then says that Hinrigh's plan is actually pretty good, and then turns to Nobunaga and Feitan to tell one of them to eat the oyster, but neither of them are having it. Nobunaga is about to throw up because he got food poisoning once after eating some seafood, so the sight of it made him sick. And fun fact, I tried to eat a raw oyster once, and I pretty much immediately threw it right back up, so I too do not like oysters. And then Feitan kind of scoffs at the idea of eating the oyster and says that he doesn't eat food other people have touched. And I really like this little scene. It was just nice seeing all three three of them joke around and mess around with each other, and I liked that Hinrigh was kind of in the middle of it. Anyway, Hinrigh just laughs and says that he didn't expect any of them to eat it because he's gonna do it, and he just gobbles it down like it's nothing, with the shell too, which really bothered me. Anyway, he eats the oyster and then explains to the spiders how the locator for the tracking device works. He says that the device doesn't give an exact location. It basically only gives you the horizontal distance. So for example, the device could say that the tracker is right in front of you, but in reality, it's in the same spot, but one floor above or below. Hinrigh then says that if he gets killed and is dissected, then the Heily will find the tracker, but he does say that he would try to save the tracker before anything like that happened. And then, like it was nothing, Hinrigh just walks right into the trap, getting teleported away. Nobunaga's like, I like this guy, he just jumps right into it. And then the tracker pulls up on the locator device, and the spiders see that the base is 500 to 1,000 meters away from where they are. And then they discuss how they'll go about searching for the location. And the paneling can make it seem a little weird. At this point in time, even though we see a crowd of people, the spiders are still just talking outside in the hallway, so they're not like actively searching around the ship. Then as they're doing that, we switch our view to Hinrigh, who gets teleported into the shower room. And as usual, he does something ridiculous that makes me love him so much because he's cool. He's cool. So Hinrigh had no idea where he was going. He didn't know what he was getting sent into. He didn't know what to expect. But just to be safe, out of instinct and preparation, Hinrigh immediately drops down to the ground and pulls out his knife. And just a little thing I was wondering about was, did he already have the plan to drop down to the ground and also turn around? Or was he thinking to drop down, but as he saw a wall right in front of him, did he immediately make the decision to also turn around as he dropped? It's not like super important or anything, but it's something really simple and really, really cool, just showing his battle IQ, or just intelligence in general. Hinrigh eventually gets up and looks around the room. The shower room is covered in blood, so Hinrigh's like, okay, I gotta stay on high alert. Hinrigh also quickly realizes that there's no one in the room, so the Heily must have interrogated or at least captured the two other people who had been sent in beforehand. So to some extent, the Heily's prepared for their arrival. We also see a very large blood drawing of a smiley face, one symbol for female and two symbols for male. We also see 6 doors. Hinrigh then senses that something else is coming, so he immediately jumps back. However, it turns out to just be Nobunaga, and he decided to come through. And that's why I tried to specify that this situation with Hinrigh was happening at the same time that the spiders were talking about how to look for the tracker device, because it could have seemed that the spiders spent X amount of time looking for the base, and then Nobunaga decided to join Hinrigh, but that's not what happened. The spiders were talking at the same time Hinrigh was in there, and then at some point Nobunaga's like, I'm going in after him. Nobunaga says that he came to help Hinrigh because he'll have a much higher chance of surviving if he has help. However, Nobunaga says that Phinx and Feitan still don't quite trust Hinrigh. Nobunaga also tells Hinrigh that he trusts him because if he were working with a Heily, a trap depending on the spiders, trusting someone that they just met would be too good to be true. So basically, through that kind of analysis, I guess, Nobunaga trusts Hinrigh. Nobunaga then says to Hinrigh that he can choose what they do next, but he also goes on to ask Hinrigh for his name because he never bothered to learn it. We then get a little nice moment showing that Hinrigh and Nobunaga are kind of becoming friends, and I think they're a great duo. I'm liking it. Hinrigh says that they're gonna jump right into things, and Nobunaga happily agrees and likes that idea. Nobunaga decides to go over to a wall, and here things get a little interesting. He goes over to the wall and sticks his finger out, and it seems like he can sense powerful Nen, or decently powerful at least. He then says that they're in the Heily base without a doubt. Hinrigh asks how does he know? So, to show him, Nobunaga takes out his sword and tries slicing through the wall, but nothing happens. Hinrigh realizes that the wall is protected by Nen, and Nobunaga says that it could be the work of a conjurer, transmuter, or a specialist. And it was a little confusing to me, but Nobunaga was either saying the whole room and presumably other rooms were completely created by a Nen user, or the rooms already existed and are just being being reinforced by a Nen user. As of now, I think option 2 is more likely, but I honestly think it's hard to say for sure. There's so many different potential Nen users and abilities, it's hard to be sure of anything. But Nobunaga goes on to say that the more powerful the Nen is that protects the walls, the closer they are to the one who's using their Nen on said walls, and we're then shown a picture of Morena. Now, it's hard to say for sure whether this is supposed to mean that this is a product of her ability or product of her doing, and that seems to be the case, but if so, that's very interesting. But this could also totally be the product of one of Morena's soldiers, and having her shown is more so a representation that Hinrigh and Nobunaga are now in her domain, the domain of her soldiers, whatever you'd like to call it. Morena being shown here could mean a couple of different things, and I'm not super confident on what exactly it is. And because Nobunaga said that whoever is doing this could be a specialist, I think it's a cool idea to throw out there that maybe Morena is a specialist, and that would spice things up. It would be a little spicy if Sir Reinek goes to try to kill her, and he, as a specialist, tries to go to kill her, who's also a specialist. But there's also totally several other Heily members who are either a conjurer or a transmuter, so there's no saying for sure whether this is Morena's doing. So interpret all that as you will. Hinrigh says that he's going to start off by opening all the doors in the room, but he wants Nobunaga to watch him as he does it in case something were to happen to him. And yet again, this type of thinking and assertiveness and straight to action thinking intrigues Nobunaga, and we see that he's starting to really like Hinrigh. I feel confident there's something important about the symbols on the doors, so the smiley face, the female symbol, and the male symbol, but I really have no idea what the importance is. If you have a thought, leave it in the comments. But Hinrigh ends up opening all the doors except for one. Seeing some toilets, Nobunaga says that they can just wait for someone to use the toilet. But Hinrigh's like, no, we're gonna act instead of wait. And while Nobunaga and Hinrigh are talking, Nobunaga tells him that he doesn't need to be so formal, just furthering their bond that they're getting or creating. And the very last thing we see is them opening a door, and we see it's a laundry room, and the chapter ends there. Now, I'm sure people are used to me stopping almost every page to read into something, but no need to fear, there are things I'm gonna read into. Although not as many as usual, this last half of the chapter, there was a good amount of things I noticed. But I just wanted to go over everything before I started picking things out, because it just flows nicer if I can talk about everything, you know? So let's go back to the very first thing I noticed. If we go back to when Kenny came over to the spiders with Hinrigh, he gave Hinrigh that weird look. I don't think it was just a cool angle. I think it was because Kenny has something else going on. That something else is a plan to use and eventually betray the spiders. I believe Kenny and Hinrigh are helping the spiders with the Heily for the sole purpose to gain their trust further. I think when Kenny walked away and Hinrigh took a moment to think, I believe he was going over the script he had planned in his head. The script to get the spiders to trust him. He gave a very similar little speech to the spiders as he did with Hisoka, and not that the two talks were exactly the same, they were different for sure. But the similarities just gave me a bad feeling, and the best way I can describe how I feel Hinrigh and the spiders interacted was it's a little too good to be true. I felt a little bit like Hinrigh had observed or received enough information about the spiders to know exactly how to interact and talk with them in order to have a better chance of gaining their trust. Kind of building off of that, Hinrigh was always choosing his words carefully, making sure to make a good impression and seem trustworthy. Although he didn't gain the trust of Phinx and Feitan, he did gain the trust of Nobunaga, or at least it seems that way. And it's interesting because Nobunaga's reasoning to trust him was that he didn't think Hinrigh would be working with the Heily. From what we know, Nobunaga never considered if Hinrigh had his own motives to betray them. Also, Hinrigh at first was referring to Nobunaga in a very respectful manner, and that just kind of adds to how Hinrigh was choosing his words carefully, making sure to give the best impression possible. But why would Hinrigh do this? What role does Kenny play? Just what's the point of all this mischievery going on? Well, the answer is actually very easy because it's already been answered for us a while back. From the moment Kenny met the spiders, he knew that they had to be dealt with. But then Hisoka and Morena happened, and it made things complicated. They had a lot to manage. But as the Shiyu and Char looked for Hisoka, the plan developed into this. Work with the spiders to crush the Heily, possibly get the spiders a little weakened, then pit the spiders and Hisoka against each other. Let them fight it out and then kill whoever remains. And through this, they kill all of the people they believe disrupt the balance. And the Heily, spiders, and Hisoka all disrupt the balance that the Shiyu and Char crave to maintain. And I'm not trying to make it seem like making this connection is some genius thing I've done. It's more so I think it's really cool seeing all these different plot points come together and still be happening, if that makes sense. Togashi has a lot going on, and he's just funneling it all together, and it's very satisfying to see. One final kind of cool thing to notice is just how well Henry is navigating things, and I know I talked about this a little, but I'm gonna do it some more. Not only has he likely gotten Hisoka to wait until the right time to fight the spiders, and I say likely because we don't know for sure if he went to the VIP room to wait, but not only is Henry trying to navigate, work with, or manipulate Hisoka, he's trying to do the same thing with the spiders. And if you think about it, it's wild to see some random crime underboss we've more or less just met. And not only does he have one of the most powerful abilities in all of fiction, the fucking pigeons, but he's so smart, handles situations so well despite the pressure and circumstances. At the worst, he's navigating between some of the most dangerous and intelligent people in Hunter x Hunter. But at the best, he's manipulating and playing some of the most dangerous and intelligent people in Hunter x Hunter. And if you do see it as Henry is manipulating the spiders and Hisoka, well then all I gotta say is please respect Henry, he's a mastermind. And respect the pigeons, you gotta respect the pigeons. So aside from it being cool, seeing the foundation being laid out for future events involving the Shiyu, Char, spiders, and Hisoka, there's a couple other things I really wanted to look into. First is, what the hell are all these doors? I have no clue what the symbols might mean, and I have no idea what most of them might be. However, if we go back to chapter 394, we know that Souffle and Notre were heading out to check on room 3101. And to get back to it, they had to go through the laundry room to the shower room and out what they call the living room door. So I think that they first went through the laundry room and out the door Hinrigh and Nobunaga just opened at the end of the chapter. And originally, I thought the room that Hinrigh and Nobunaga got transported to was the shower room / processing room. However, there is a door and inside is a shower, so that could be the door Notre was talking about. And maybe that room leads to wherever they called the family room. But honestly, I'm not entirely sure. The only thing I am sure of is that the laundry room Hinrigh and Nobunaga are walking into is the room Terebellum, Mont, and Chiffon were in dissecting or doing something to dead bodies. Considering Hinrigh and Nobunaga are entering the laundry room, I'm willing to bet that if they come across some Heily members, it's gonna be one or all of Terebellum, Chiffon, and Mont. Considering their levels, I'd assume they'll only come across Terebellum, but who knows? And while on the topic of them, I felt like mentioning what I think they may have been doing with the dead bodies, them being Chiffon and Mont. In my mind, you only keep dead bodies around for one of two reasons in Hunter x Hunter. Either to gain or steal power somehow, or to create some kind of puppet. Considering that the Heily gain power from the act of killing, I doubt they could gain any extra strength from dead bodies, leaving me to think that it's possible Chiffon and Mont were creating some kind of puppets. Or because Terebellum seemed close with them, it's a stretch, but maybe Chiffon and Mont were prepping the bodies for some kind of use by either Terebellum or another Heily member. But that's just a thought I had. Also, while talking about what Heily members might be up to, from my understanding in chapter 394, Oralje and Yokotani were supposed to be guarding the trap door in the room Hinrigh was transported to. Meanwhile, Souffle and Notre were to check on room 3101 from the outside. So where are these people? Well, assuming I didn't get their jobs and what they were doing wrong, then this is what I'm thinking happened. Aralja and Yokotane were probably in the main kill room when the first two people got sent through. They were likely the ones that interrogated them. They then ended up leaving once realizing that spiders might be coming. And that seems pretty reasonable to me. But where's Souffle and Notre? Well, the only thing that really makes sense to me is that because they had to use different rooms to go there, because room 3101 had been found, Souffle and Notre simply haven't gotten back to 3101 yet. So it's possible that as Nobunaga and Hinrigh continue through the Heily base, Souffle and Notre will end up coming to room 3101, and who knows, maybe they'll go through the trapdoor and start basically tracking Hinrigh and Nobunaga's footsteps. Another possibility is that if you remember in chapter 395, when Nobunaga and the others went into that back room, they realized that some people had been there and they just left like almost right before the spiders entered. So that could have been Notre and Souffle. Hard to say for sure though. And then last thing before I go over my, overall thoughts on the chapter is a little more thought into who's protecting the walls with Nen. Because whether it's Morena or not, the Nen user responsible is powerful enough to make Nobunaga get serious, and it was able to protect against Nobunaga's sword. It's not some outlandish feat, but it proves that the user responsible is certainly strong. And if the user is Morena, then the fact that she can do that, on top of Etude and Love, I think it should make us way more concerned about her and what she can do than we were before. Overall, this was a fun chapter, and although it doesn't quite compare to the last few chapters, it's still a Hunter x Hunter chapter, so I was captivated the entire time. I loved every part of this chapter, but the reason why this chapter was sneaky good is because of all the foundation it lays out. This chapter shows the progression of Hinrigh and Kenny's plan to not only destroy the Heily, but the spiders too. We're slightly seeing, but we'll likely see soonishly. That's not a word, but I'm making it one. Soonish. We're gonna see the true strength of the Heily as well as Morena, I think. I feel it in my gut, but my gut's wrong a lot, so who knows? But overall, we've definitely taken major steps towards the all-out war between the Mafia families and the spiders. This might not have been as deep of a dive into this chapter as I'd normally do, but I was late to make this video, and I'm satisfied with what I got. I'm so thankful and excited that we're getting so many more Hunter x Hunter chapters, and I truly can't wait to see where Togashi's gonna take the story. But that's all I got for you today. As always, leave your thoughts, theories, and ideas in the comments.